So welcome to Milestones Series 2, The Windrush Nation. I'm Mike Johnson, and I'm joined today with co-host Dr. Dwayne Neal, OBE. Milestones is the podcast that has been reviewing the significant contributions made in the UK Black community since 1948. In this second series, The Windrush Nation, we're taking an inclusive approach by expanding the guest list to include contributions made by people whose heritage is from the Caribbean, Africa, and Black British people with a dual heritage.
Okay. And Mike, it's wonderful to be teamed up with you again on the Milestone series. I have to say that this series is very close to my heart because it's about our story, it's about our community, and as you've rightfully said already, it's about the Windrush Nation. And this series, of course, for us, highlights a number of key areas where contributors and big hitters in our community have been contributing. Today, of course, we're going to be focusing on those in the STEM areas. But just to give viewers a sense of where we're likely to go across the series, we'll be looking at politics and sport, we'll be looking at media, and of course, the good and the great. And my particular favorite, we'll be looking at some of the geniuses in our community. And we'll go on to be talking about the business, big hitters and philanthropists. So those are just some of the areas. We've got more than 10 areas that we will touch on. But it is my great pleasure also to just briefly introduce our two guest contributors. Both of them are good friends of mine. Rudy Page, who runs his own show, and he's all over the community in a variety of ways. And Rudy, feel free to say a few words by way of your own introduction after this. And Winston Bygraves, Pastor Winston Bygrave is a minister of a number of churches, and I've known Winston for a good number of years. So, gentlemen, welcome.
Great to be here, Dwayne. Back on Milestones again. Good to see you, Mike, Winston.
Yes, sir. Well, you're across my feed everywhere I go. I'm seeing Rudy Page. I'm seeing.
Yes, I've been around a long time.
This man, but it's all good. It's all good, mate. It's all good. You're doing a great job. And I think before Winston comes in, just say a little bit about the names of people that we're going to be reviewing. We mentioned Africa. Now, Windrush, instinctively you think Caribbean, but Africa, we're looking at the fact that many people from the African continent came to the UK in the spirit of Windrush. You know, few came first, settled, sent for their children, and so on, and they continued to make, large inroads into the UK. So we wanted to include those as well. And then the people of mixed heritage, they've got maybe a Nigerian and a Jamaican and other, it's all happening, and we need to be inclusive of that in what we're doing. So those are the concepts behind what we're doing with the Milestone, the Windrush Nation. And perhaps one of the first things we could talk about is, what does the Windrush Nation mean to you? But Winston, over to you.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's great to be on Milestones today, and great to see you, Rudy, and my good friend Dwayne. As Dwayne said, I'm a Baptist minister. I pastor a church in West Hendon, which is northwest London, but I'm also a regional minister for the London Baptist, and I oversee about 50 churches in the northwest area of London. They cover the boroughs of Brent, Barnet, Enfield, and Hillingdon. And but prior to that, my previous life, I was a teacher. My last role was as a deputy head, again in the Northwest London school. And so great to be here, and great to talk about the Windrush generation, as well as I'm glad that you've expanded it to as well the continent of Africa, because in many of our churches, especially in London, our congregation consists of many Nigerians and Ghanaians. In fact, in my own church, my main leaders are Nigerian and Ghanaian young men and young women. So great to be here. and to contribute. Thank you.
Let me, though, continue the sense of inclusion by saying a few words about the other professor in our midst. And he has a dual heritage background. He has a West African father and an English mother. Professor Richard Oreffo is a Liverpool graduate, and he got his first degree there, but he is currently the professor at Southampton University. And I have to read this to be certain I don't screw it up. He holds the chair of the Musculoskeletal Science group in Southampton. And what that means is that he is head of the research into human development using stem cells and regeneration. And why I make those 2 points is that he has developed a technique using stem cells and titanium joints to actually provide replacement joints where with the stem cells, the muscles grow around it and within it, and it's virtually as good as new. But, you know, Richard's work didn't just stop there. He was instrumental in founding an organization that has now taken that science and made it practical realities. I would encourage everyone to look up Renovos, Renovos, Biologics, because he founded that, and that organization, that limited company, is still producing the sort of items that are used in various operations. So Richard Oreffo is an extraordinary fellow, not very much in the public eye, except that a couple of years ago he founded the Cowrie Foundation, and that foundation is about providing scholarship to talented Black British young people who win places at leading universities, but perhaps have financial concerns. And the Cowrie Foundation has its own website. I would encourage anyone who wants to know more about that to have a look at it. So again, a bit like Frank, he's not just performing at the top and the highest level, he's also thinking about the community in the round, and he's wanting to play his part to nurture and develop the talent that's coming through. How do folks feel about Richard Oreffo?
The thing that struck me as I read his profile was, again, the scholarship, because, you know, as we get older, the thing that crosses our mind is always about legacy. What are we going to leave? And obviously we want to care for our family and our children, but it's when we begin to move beyond that I think that's really something to shout about. And I'm really impressed about that scholarship that's aimed at disadvantaged Black students. So well done, and what an encouragement.
But you know, Winston, you say disadvantaged. I would tend to flip it by saying smart young people who perhaps don't have the level of financial support.
Yeah.
And this provides that level of financial support. So for me, those young people are not intellectually disadvantaged.
No way.
They just need some of the underpinning that others have because their families are financially better off.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's that opportunity. And really following on what Winston said, I was particularly struck by the support for young people, and to get young people, again, as we know, mentor and show them the way. They've got to have the right attitude, the aspirations, and know that they've got to attain those goals. So if you've got somebody like that in such a complex area to be in as well, so those smart youngsters and somebody to guide them, I think, again, it's very impressive, because over time, many of those will come through and do lots of amazing things.
Absolutely. And you know, in Reach Society, almost every month we get inquiries from parents or young people seeking scholarship, seeking financial support, and I routinely point them in the direction of the Cowrie Foundation. And I'm hoping a number of them will have met their criteria to receive assistance. And in many respects, when you look at the work that Frank is doing, at the work that Richard is doing, at the work that Kevin is doing, those big hitters are not just self-serving. They are serving the wider Black community in this country as well. And we must laud them for that. Mike?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at his profile again, and a lot of the things that he specializes in, a few years ago, you'd shake your head. Nah, that's science fiction, and it's right here in front of you. So again, kudos. And again, he's a fellow of his own, profession. So top. I think, if the more we can promote people like this, that others coming through can see it is attainable. Again, that's the way to go. And he traveled as well.
Absolutely.
He traveled to Texas, San Antonio, and then came back and developed further here.
And he's not just stayed in academia. He's worked for AstraZeneca for a time.
Yeah.
So
it's important to travel. I think.
Say again, Rudy.
I'm saying it's important to travel because I think that, again, encouraging young people to seize those opportunities and widen their perspective. I mean, it's really important, if they get that opportunity.
What we're doing, I believe, is we are sharing with our community a picture that isn't often shared about our community. Because we've highlighted 3 individuals, one of a Caribbean background, one of an African background, one of a dual heritage background. But, they are just the very tip of a very large iceberg. Because we could have chosen to talk about Dr. Emise Okorocha, who is a developing surgeon. She's not at the top of her profession yet, but she is very well respected. Or we could have gone to talking about someone at the end of her career, Dr. Joan St. John, who's a career GP, but she specializes in diabetes. And even in her retirement, she is almost still in the flow in spreading
Trusted
the word.
Messenger.
Practice it absolutely about what you can do to live with diabetes, but also what you can do to avoid developing diabetes. And there are other people. We mentioned one of them, Professor Donald Palmer. All of us here know him and his role during COVID. But Donald is one of the leading immunologists in our community. And for folks who may not have heard that term before, he specializes in understanding how our immune system works. And he, like Frank, is humble and willing to share his knowledge and encourage folks to get into science in all that he does. And of course, there is the other person that we could have, Mike, when we were looking at our shopping list, Professor Winston Morgan. He's a toxicologist and he's a biochemist. And, when we had some of our networking conversations talking about COVID, we invited Winston to join those conversations to try and get under a lot of the suspicion about the vaccinations. And he was able, I was on the call when he was saying, I have looked at the toxicology about the vaccination and know it's not going to make you infertile, and know it's not going to cause you to grow a second head, and know it's not going to steal your firstborn child. All of that is nonsense. And if you want to protect yourself and your family, you become vaccinated. So, it feels like by just talking about a small number of STEM contributors, we're basically saying, our community, the Windrush Nation, is rich with STEM scientists, and they are distinguishing themselves in a variety of sectors. These are just a small sample of the many sectors that they are making their mark, making their contribution, and we should all be incredibly proud of them. And so when I look at the 3 people that we've talked about, not just their jobs, but in the other things they're doing, I see ongoing real life contribution. I think they're doing it because they see the real need, and they also see how they can help. Now,
it's the right thing to do.
It will not be a panacea that cures all the challenges out there, but they have enough compassion to say, I can make a contribution. I don't think they're building legacy. I think they're saying there is real need now, and I can do something. That was the very clear sense I got from talking with Richard Oreffo, because he could see a need. How do I help those who didn't have the financial backing, but had the intellectual horsepower? That was why the Cowrie Foundation became a real thing.
Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to you coming together again in the next episode. Take care.
Rudy, Winston, thank you, my friends. And Mike, to be continued.
Indeed. All right. Take care now.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.